it's up.
Let me just very quickly. So welcome again to one of our interviews that we are carrying out now. We're trying to do this every Saturday. We're trying to bring to all of you people as much information as possible when it comes to health and health issues. And today we are honored to have Dr. Kirstie Lawton. Dr. Lawton has over 20 years of international experience in nutrition and lifestyle interventions. She's a dual qualified professional with a PhD in public health nutrition, registered with both AFN and BNT. She has contributed to educational research and advisory projects for charities, NGOs, and government bodies in the UK and abroad. Dr. Lawton, thank you for being with us. It's really a pleasure to have you with us, and I'm just going to hand the microphone to you.
Thank
You
you.
have prepared a wonderful presentation for us today. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me. So as you mentioned, I'm based in the UK, but I run a clinic called You Nutrition Clinic. The main focus of the clinic is neurodegenerative health and brain health, but we do support other conditions as well. I've been practicing now for 25 years in different ways. I'm also a member of the editorial board for the Nutritional Medicine Institute and Journal in the UK. And if anyone wants to get in touch at any time, you can either find me on Instagram at Dr. Kirstie Lawton or at Nutrition in the Brain or at one of my two websites, or you can email Ray, the office manager, at info@unutritionclinic.com.
Excellent.
So we were just having a conversation there just before everyone joined, and we were talking about the statement, "You are what you eat," which is something we all hear. And I actually said, so I thought I'd just repeat it with everyone here. Like, first of all, we are what we eat, but we are in fact what we ingest, and that is the good and the bad. And we can ingest through our skin, we can ingest through our lungs, and we can ingest through our gut. And we can ingest any number of nutrients if we don't have barriers in the way, but we are also ingesting a lot of toxins in this world: toxins, plastics, metals, chemicals, molds, pathogens. So we have to consider ourselves not just as being what we eat, but being everything that we are exposed to. And when it comes to what we eat, we are what we eat, but we're actually what we eat, what we break down, what we digest, what we can absorb, and then what we can get to the cell and utilize. So it's a much more nuanced process than just being that we are what we eat. Eating is just the start of the process of nutrition. So I'm going to talk about two different things today. I'm going to start with nutrigenomic testing. Anyone who is here that is one of my clients will be aware of this, because I do nutrigenomic testing with pretty much every one of my clients. And then we're going to touch on metabolomic testing, and I'll explain what the difference is, and I'll just give you some information on both and the benefits that they can have, and also the flaws with them, but you know what we're really using them for in clinic. So nutrigenomic testing is looking at our DNA, which sounds really, really complex. But what we're doing is we're looking at our DNA, and we're looking at any area on our DNA where the code is just not quite perfect. It's got just a little dent in it, say, and that can have an impact on what it's coding for. So basically, our DNA codes for all of the proteins in our body, and we are made up of many, many, many proteins. We've got proteins that are what we call enzymes, so they help little reactions to occur. We're going to be talking about those today, but our hair, our skin, our muscles, our immune cells, our red blood cells, our hormones. There isn't anything in your body that isn't made from proteins and our DNA codes for that. So when we talk about nutrigenomic testing, we're looking at the DNA that codes for the proteins and then what those proteins actually do in our body. So we're going to be touching on that. What's really important to note about nutrigenomic testing is that this is really just showing your predisposition. Also, people run these tests and they say, oh, should we run it again in 6 months? No, because this is your DNA. And this is what you were born with. And we can slightly adapt certain genes through diet and lifestyle. But realistically, your DNA is your DNA. But what we can do is we can use certain nutrients to support any little genes that aren't quite working properly. So if the gene isn't working very well and it's a bit down-regulated, so it's a bit slow, we can use certain nutrients to speed it up. And if the gene is working a little bit too quickly, we can use certain nutrients to slow it down. And that is what nutrigenomics really is. It's using diet and supplementation to do what we can to balance out any imbalances in our genes. But it's looking at our predisposition. So are we predisposed to a pathway in our liver not working properly? Or are we predisposed to not being able to utilize a vitamin properly? Where if we want to look at our current health status, what we want to consider is metabolomic testing that I'll touch on at the end of the presentation. So why nutrigenomic testing? So basically, functional medicine practitioners or integrative nutritional therapy practitioners are really just body detectives. We're looking at someone who is presenting with various symptoms, and our job is to try to figure out what might be going wrong where and think about how we can best support that. So to understand dysfunction in the body, we've really got to understand how the body functions, and we have to understand that at a biochemical and biological levels. We've really got to understand how every pathway in the body operates. We have to consider every impacting factor on every pathway as well. So externally, that might be our diet, it might be our lifestyle, our sleep pattern, our exercise levels, our stress levels, emotional health, or it might be our surrounding environment. So our air quality, our water quality, any toxins that we have been exposed to or are currently exposed to. Internally, we've got to consider the health of our gut and our microbiome, because as I said, you are what you eat, but you're also what you can break down and digest and then absorb to get it into the body. And without a really, really robust, healthy, happy gut, you won't be able to do that. So from the outset, the nutrients you're eating won't be getting to where they need to be. And certain things that you're consuming might be able to get into your body when you don't want them to. We've got to consider our liver health, because the liver is like the great detoxifier of the body. It's like the incineration plant. It takes all of the toxic waste, it breaks it down, sorts it, crushes it, puts it in bile, takes it to the gut and releases it to be removed from the body, or sends it to the kidney to be excreted in the urine. So if our liver pathways aren't doing really well, then how can we be doing well? We have to consider our immune health. Is our immune health having a bit of an overreaction? And if so, why? What's triggered that? We know in a lot of neurodegenerative conditions that there is neuroinflammation. We know with ALS that IL-6 is particularly elevated in people with ALS compared to people who don't have an ALS diagnosis. This is all an inflammatory overreaction. So we have to understand the immune system and we have to know how to calm it down. We have to consider hormone balance. Hormone balance is really important. It's something that gets a little bit ignored, but cortisol is a hormone that can be very dominant over other hormones. And when cortisol is high, it's hugely disruptive for the body. There's other hormones as well that have other functions in the body that might suffer if we're not in balance. We've got to think about our metabolic health. You know, how is our blood flowing around our body? How is How's our blood pressure? Is there anything niggling that is adding to our load? And of course, mental wellness and history of trauma are massive factors in any neurological health condition. But on top of all that, another piece of the jigsaw puzzle is our genes. So what we have, and we can consider Parkinson's genes and we can consider ALS genes as examples. There's very specific genes like Parkin or LRK or any of these PINK in Parkinson's, or SAD1, TARD-BP, or C9orf72 in ALS, that are very known genes that drive the condition. But in addition to that, we have to think about the indirect impact of our genes. And that's what we look at when we're considering all of these little tiny dents in our genetic code. That means that when a protein is produced, it might just be not quite perfect. It's not the same as something like a disrupted C9orf72 gene, where the disfigurement in the gene causes the protein that's produced to look completely wrong. So the body doesn't know what it is, and it's all misfolded. These are just like little tiny dents. Like imagine if you had like a little zipper on your coat and one of the little zipper prongs was just a little bit bent. It just, doesn't quite work properly. That's what we're looking at when we're thinking about these single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs, as you all have heard of them being called. So as I said, nutrigenomics is an interaction between our nutrition and our genes, and especially in relation to the prevention or treatment of any health condition. So how does it work? So basically, your body is just a great big factory, and it's a factory that has lots and lots and lots of little production lines, one after another. So you can see here, this is only part of the energy production pathway. This isn't your neurological pathways or your hormonal pathways or anything else. This is just the start of the process of energy production. And you can see all of these little pathways, little wheels that have to spin, all these little tiny reactions. So as you can imagine, there's lots and lots and lots of little places where things can go a bit wrong. So if we've got this series of reactions up the middle here, for example, if right in the middle of this little pathway here, this little production line, isn't working properly, it's going to throw off so many other pathways before it and after it, because the pathways before it will start to have a buildup of what they're trying to do. And the pathways after it will be just sitting there empty, waiting for what's happening behind them to feed along the production line. So just like in a factory, if you had 10 production lines all in a row, and production line 3 was missing its supervisor, what you would have is a real backup in production line 1 and 2, and then everything from production line 4 onwards wouldn't really be working quite as well. So every little production line in our body has a supervisor, and that supervisor is a protein, and the genes that we look at in these tests are the genes that build those little supervisors. What we can do through nutrigenomics is see that a supervisor is a little bit lazy, think about what little helpers we can put on the production line to speed things along. When we talk about the little helpers, what we're talking about is vitamins, minerals, plant nutrients, and other key nutrients in the body. So factory, production lines, little supervisor that might be working normally but might be a bit lazy or might be a little bit overexcited in his job, and little workers that, if the factory supervisor is being a bit lazy, can help speed things along, or if the factory supervisor is being a bit overexcited, that we can put in little cofactors to calm the pathway down a bit. And that's really what we're talking about. So to give you a sort of visual on that, so we've got this little part here called the Krebs cycle, taking you all back to your biology lessons in school when you talked about energy production and the Krebs cycle. This is a production line, okay? This is the start of energy production. It's called the Krebs cycle. It feeds through to the electron transport chain. This little wheel spins, billions of times a day, and every single cell in your body and every mitochondria has this little wheel spinning. Um, and so what we have here is a production line. It starts here, it ends here. This then becomes the start of the next production line. It ends here. This becomes the start and it ends here. Okay. The little words in red here that end in ASE, they're little enzymes, they're little proteins. So if this little protein is being a bit lazy, it's going to be really hard to go from here to here. If this little protein's working too hard, we're going to go from here to here too quickly, and we're going to get a build up here. So when we come to look at what metabolomic testing is, we're going to come back to this. But today, just for nutrigenomics, we're just going to focus on the little proteins, and we're going to focus on some of the key ones. So one of my lovely, lovely clients is called Claire, and she's recorded a short 15-minute video with me that we're going to send out. Tabitha's going to send it out to everyone. And the tests we're going to look at are Claire's tests. Claire is living alongside ALS. And she very kindly said I can use her tests. We used them in this presentation for a Healing ALS presentation. And I highly recommend anyone listening watch Claire's video and understand how running these tests helped Claire to understand a lot of things that had happened over her health history that she had been told was all in her head, which of course is doctor speak for I don't know what's going on, so I'm just going to blame you. So Claire will be talking about that, and that will come out to you. So please do have a look at that. So again, just to run through what I'm talking about, we have a little code for a protein. We call it a SNP if there's a little dent in it. The little point on the code where there's a little dent is a little mutation, a little dent on it. And so in this talk, we're going to consider them as the supervisors, and then we're going to consider the worker bees that can really help those supervisors. So if something's written in big capital letters, then that is a gene, it's a genetic SNP. And this is one pathway in the body that actually in ALS, I see this pathway downregulated in close to 100% of my patients. And I'm actually doing my master's dissertation next year because I'm doing a master's in neuroscience and neurodegeneration at the moment at the University of Sheffield in the UK under Professor Pamela Shaw and my Professor John Wood. And I'm looking at this pathway because I am so interested in why it's so downregulated for something so essential, which is choline, which you may know is essential for acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, but also phosphatidylcholine and phosphatidylserine, which are parts of your cell membrane. They're really essential phospholipids in the body. But this is just, we're using this as an example. So we've got the supervisor, and then we've got the little workers. So this is, we add in PQQ, it's going to help this pathway along. Because you can see this little pathway is downregulated. So the test I use is from LifeCode GX in the UK. It's a really excellent company. It only sells via practitioners, but if anyone is interested in knowing more about this, do get in touch. So as I said, if our supervisor is functioning too slowly, we need to think about how we can speed it up. And if it's functioning too quickly, we need to think about how we can slow it down. And we can do this with nutrients. So let's have a look at Claire's pathways and see what we did in clinic to really support her based on her genetic predisposition. So the pathways I'm going to look at today are pathways that you may have heard of, because we're going to be looking at methylation, and we're going to be looking at some of the liver pathways as well, so liver detoxification. So everyone always talks about MTHFR as if it's the only gene involved in the production of methylfolate. But you can see from here, getting from folate in the diet requires 1, 2, 3, 4 production lines. So you can see here for Claire, so at the very start of this, this little gene is a little bit downregulated. So when it's orange, it means it's heterozygous, and when it's red, it means it's homozygous. So basically, part or fully downregulated. So you can see here from Claire, she's a bit downregulated in a gene called RFC1. What does that mean? It means that she would struggle converting folate or folic acid to DHF or dihydrofolate. Okay, so what do? We can add in more folate to just really push down through this pathway. Then a bit upregulated here, so this pathway goes quite quickly. When she gets to here, she's a bit downregulated in this gene here, this SHMT1 gene. So because she's a bit downregulated here, she would struggle to convert the tetrahydrofolate down to the next part, which is 5,10-methyl tetrahydrofolate. But what it would also mean is she would have difficulty converting back and forth between glycine and serine, which are two essential, or they're not essential, but they're two protein building blocks in the body. The body can make them from other protein building blocks, but it just means it's a bit downregulated. So we need to make sure she's getting plenty of glycine, plenty of serine. And we know that to help this pathway, B6 is super helpful. So we would make sure we were supplementing with plenty of B6 to really support this pathway. And then when we get down to here, we can see that she has two genes, both downregulated to go from the 5,10-methylene THF down to here, which is actually 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate, or what we know of as methylated folate. So when you take a supplement of methylated folate, you're actually taking this and you're bypassing this whole system. This is why methylated folate is typically recommended for a lot of people. Of course, if you're not downregulated at all and then you're throwing in methylfolate, that can be a bit of a challenge. And if you're completely downregulated 20 pathways further forward and you're completely backed up, then for those people, methylated folate might not be the best idea too. But for most people, supplementing with methylfolate is quite successful because it bypasses all of this. But you can see if we wanted to sort of gently nudge this pathway along, we could use vitamin B2 and B3. And where there's B2 and B3, there's always B1. So for Claire, what we did was we put in B1, B2, B3, B6, and we put in methylfolate as well. What then happens is with the process of methylation, it's almost like basketball training, and it's about passing the ball along. So methyl, if you imagine it like a basketball, so folate, first of all, has to get the ball, almost like pump the ball up so it's got the ball. And then the job is to pass that ball to vitamin B12 and then come back, make another ball, pass that ball to B12, make another ball, pass that ball to B12. And that's its job all day long, just taking the ball, passing the ball. B12's job is to then take that ball from folate, pass it to methionine, turn around, take another ball, and pass it along. So it goes from being unmethylated because it doesn't have the ball to being methylated, has the ball, passes the ball over its back to being unmethylated. Sounds really, really simple, but these little tiny reactions in the body have massive, massive consequences. So for Claire here, finally, because we've supplemented with B1, 2, 3, 6 and methylfolate, she's got the ball. She's the basketball player called folate who has the ball, but she can't turn and pass it along because she's downregulated, red, homozygous, in this MTR gene. So there's a bit of a block. She can't quite pass it on. So what we need to do to really help Claire is make sure she's got optimal B12. And you'll hear in Claire's story how she just could not keep her B12 levels up and how it impacted her tiredness level for years. And she was very unwell. And it was because genetically she really struggled. And I'll show you how. And we also supplement with zinc here as well to just really support this process so that methylfolate can pass that methyl ball and come back here. So it would pass the ball and come back here, make the next ball, pass the ball along, make the next ball, pass the ball along, and just do this all day. So now we're going to go into the methionine cycle. This is where we see what happens with things like B12, homocysteine, methionine. So what happens is folate passes the ball here, and then methyl B12 passes it over to methionine and comes back and is unmethylated. Methionine then passes the ball to SAMe. SAMe is hugely important in energy pathways, SAMe to SAH down to homocysteine. So you can see here with this down-regulated gene, Claire is genetically predisposed with her FUT2 gene to her ability to absorb and make available vitamin B12. So she has this down-regulation. So she has this down-regulated ability to pass the folate over, and then she's down-regulated as well in her ability to absorb B12 from the food she's eating, which is why having B12 injections works really well for Claire. And then here you can see a little bit down-regulated in her ability to take that B12 in her system and methylate it. So we really want to make sure we're supporting these pathways as well. So we're supporting this pathway with some magnesium, potassium, and some zinc. So it's a game of like in my suitcase I packed when it comes to building these supplements. So far in our suitcase, we've got B1, B2, B3, B6, methylfolate, methyl B12, and the ingredients for SAMe, so magnesium and potassium. So again, for Claire, as I said, down-regulated in this choline pathway. So what happens in the body is the body always has a backup plan. So if there's a system that isn't working, the body's like, it doesn't matter, I've got a backup plan. And for methylation, if that pathway there isn't working, your folate pathway, and if this isn't working, we can't get to methionine, because this is so essential for life, the body's like, it's okay, we can just get homocysteine to convert up through choline to methionine. Great, unless you're completely down-regulated in this pathway. So because of these genes, Claire's ability to synthesize choline, PEMT, and her ability to transport choline to the mitochondria and convert it to betaine is all very compromised. So for Claire, we made sure that we've got plenty of choline and plenty of PQQ and betaine. Now, we don't always have to think supplements. We can think food choices. We get betaine from beets. We can use a beetroot powder. We get PQQ from kiwi or papaya or parsley or numbers, other sources. We don't always have to add another supplement to our list. We can think about what we can do through diet to really support this. For choline, we've got sunflower seeds, we've got organ meats, we've got salmon, if you can get really good wild Alaskan salmon when no one has polluted it at all, just as it's about to hop out the river. We've got eggs, so if you can get really great grass-reared happy hens with no GMO feed at all, then eggs can be a source as well. So that's how we supported Claire here. And then here, because she's a bit down-regulated, here in this gene, we made sure there was plenty of magnesium and potassium. Again, you can get potassium from really great quality organic coconut water or from just, standard electrolyte solutions. Magnesium is much harder to get through food because soil has been so massively depleted. So almost all of my patients do need a lot of magnesium. The next part of the pathway coming down from homocysteine is feeding into liver detoxification pathways and energy pathways. So as you can see, the body is just a great big series of production lines. Production line, production line, production line, production line, from homocysteine down, another production line. This can then go in 3 directions. And you can see here from Claire that she's a bit down-regulated in a gene that converts the protein building block cysteine to glutathione. So we need to think about Claire's ability to make glutathione, because she struggles a little bit converting it from cysteine. And glutathione is made from 3 different protein building blocks, so glutamine, glycine, and cysteine. So she's got a little bit of a genetic challenge here. And I'll show you why that's important for Claire in a slide or two. Over this side, again, hi. Someone? Oh, okay. On this side, again, struggling a little bit in the energy pathway. So we know that Claire needs a bit of active B12. to just really support this conversion here in the Krebs cycle. This page was really particularly valuable for Claire because anyone who has struggled with any kind of life trauma, which Claire will mention in her presentation, you know, we're almost like a helium balloon up in the air in our fight or flight response. And it's really hard to bring ourselves back down sometimes just through life trauma. But then if we're down regulated in our genes like COMT or MAOA and B, what can happen is we can end up creating dopamine, which is our anticipatory hormone. Like we're really like, okay, something's going to happen. We're stewing on it. We need to make sure we need to remember. Great if you're a paramedic, a policeman in the military, a CEO, you know, you've got that brain that can just keep going, but not great for your health because you actually really want to be able to break down these hormones. And if you can't, then we've got a bit of a problem. You know, we're in that constant fight or flight state. And so there's things that we can do if we know people are downregulated in these genes, things like B2, which is riboflavin, magnesium, SAMe, to just sort of try and calm that system down a little bit. Another really interesting gene is the VDR gene. That's the vitamin D receptor gene. So every single cell in the body has these little vitamin D receptors, and they just grab the vitamin D and pull it in. So if you're really down regulated there, what a lot of people find is they'll take vitamin D supplements, they get their vitamin D up. The minute they stop the supplements, it drops down. Our genes can explain this. So there's a lot of validation that can occur through taking these tests for things that you've noticed in your health history. And then finally, just on nutrigenomics, I just want to touch on the liver pathways. So in our liver, and I can come back and give a whole lecture on liver if Tabitha wants me to, because as you know, I love talking about the liver and the gut. But
I would love to. I would love to. That would be amazing.
happy to come and explain all of this in detail. But basically, we have a 3 different process system in the liver. So all the toxins come down a great big river that's just full of junk, and they all hit a big filter, and all those toxins get scooped aside. The water that runs the other side of the filter is nice and clean. That happens in the body. It happens with about 2 liters of blood every minute, just coming through the liver. Get everything. So people say, I'm going to detoxify. It's like, you're already detoxifying. You're detoxifying 24/7. You might not be detoxifying brilliantly, but you're detoxifying. So all of that junk gets scraped in, almost like into a big incinerator, crunched down. And that's this first part of detoxification, phase 1. It's really, really, really important, but it's also really, really, really toxic. And then if you're quite upregulated in this part of detoxification, you're going to very quickly create a lot of toxic fumes. If you're then a little bit down regulated in your ability to sort of turn the fans on and the vents on and like hoover up all of that oxidative stress that you've caused in this really highly potent phase, then you're going to have oxidative stress. So this downregulated gene that Claire has, NQO1, means there's less ability to neutralize that oxidative stress. So we can end up with more toxicity. We can support that with B2, folate, cruciferous vegetables, providing you're not too downregulated in your sulfonation pathway and you can actually tolerate sulfur. The next part, this phase 2, is almost like everything's been crunched down here. The fans have gone on, sucked all the oxidative stress out. Everything's then sorted into one of actually 6 skips, but there's 5 represented here because the 6th is just what happens to your amino acids. Everything gets like shoved down into a great big skip, crunched down further, and the skip it goes down is based on what it is. So molds go down certain different pathways, metals will go down other pathways, hormones down others. And so the 3 I would say are most important for detoxification are glucuronidation, sulfonation, and glutathione conjugation. And you can see that Claire is very down-regulated in these 2 genes. And this one, the GSTM1 gene, codes for an enzyme that helps with the production of glutathione. So we now know from this that we really, really need to support Claire and her glutathione production, because not only is she down-regulated in the ability to convert cysteine to glutathione, she's also very down-regulated here in her glutathione pathway. And in addition, in her glucuronidation pathway. So there's lots of things we can do to support these pathways. Sulfurous vegetables work really well on all of these pathways. There's lots we can do to support glutathione itself. So things like selenium, curcumin, vitamin C, NAC, any sulfurous vegetables, all the cruciferous vegetables and such. So, but knowing this means we know we have to sort of almost go in a bit harder. You know, we know that this gene may diminish production of glutathione by 30 to 40%, for example. So we know that we have to really go in harder and support that pathway more. And then I just wanted to touch on this one as well, because this is one that's very relevant to ALS. So this is how we break down mold. And you can see that we have that GSTM1 gene again. So we really need the glutathione pathway to work properly to break mold down, because what happens is we say for aflatoxin, we'll break it down into something called AFPO, which is hugely toxic. And you can see here, because of those phase 1 pathways, these ones here, the ones that are going too quickly, Claire would very quickly convert from aflatoxin to AFPO. And then she would struggle to get past here. So now, of course, we've got her on supplements, but, you know, Claire isn't 10 years old. Like, she's had an unsupplemented 50 or so years of having a buildup of all of this in her system, which is why having these genetic deficiencies can actually lead to chronic illness. You know, we can now start dealing with it, but we've got a whole life history to catch up on. This is just looking at paracetamol, just as another example. Every time we take a paracetamol that we take all the time, we have to remember that it has to go down a liver pathway. And actually, all 3 of the main pathways are involved. The glucuronic acid pathway, so paracetamol can go down that, or it can go down the glutathione pathway here, or it can go down the sulfonation pathway. So if you're blocked in all 3 pathways, then you're going to struggle to break down paracetamol unless you're really, really supporting the pathways. Also, if you were, say, really clear and open in this pathway and completely blocked in these, all the paracetamol would sort of come down this pathway. You're then massively overloading that pathway, which, you know, means that other things that you're ingesting won't be detoxified as easily. And then this is just an example of all environmental toxins. You can see like really fast conversion to here, quite toxic. And then this needs to go down the glutathione pathway or the sulfur or the glucuron pathway. And you can see Claire down-regulated in all 3. So using these tests, what it does is it really helps me as a practitioner to look at someone's picture and say, right, I can see you're really down-regulated in your glutathione pathway. So we need to really support that. We really want to open up that pathway in your liver. We want to make sure that it is functioning brilliantly, because without that, we can't fully clear things from your body. And we also have to remember that this isn't just about the liver pathway. Glutathione is essential body-wide. So if you're not able to make glutathione, it means that your immune system is missing one of its key antioxidants. And it's putting pressure on the other antioxidants, which would be vitamins A, C, E, zinc, selenium, alpha lipoic acid, PQQ, a few others, right? Then if you're not getting those in your diet, you're putting a lot of pressure on the ones you're getting. And then if your gut health isn't great and you're not able to even get those into your body, then your defenses are down to oxidation and damage is going to occur. So how does that differ to...
Dr. Lawton, sorry
Yeah,
to
sorry.
just a quick question.
Yeah.
So, okay, so when you do the testing and you determine, okay, so this particular part of the production line is not working properly, as you were explaining, and here and there, and we need to support with either vitamin V or B2, B6, whatever it needed. My question goes to how do you determine the amount needed to make that factory or that part of the factory work properly? And then when is it too much or too little? How do you establish, is it just trial and error, or how can you do that?
That's a really, really good question. So I have so many people come to my clinic and they give me their initial supplement list. And that also some people are really tightly holding on to that. They're like, no, I've heard it helps, I've heard it helps. So it's very hard to sometimes take those out of the hands of patients. Um, but we have to remember that we can overstimulate one pathway and that can have a knock-on effect on another pathway. And we have to remember that more isn't always more. Sometimes less is more. You don't always necessarily need to go in with the very highest amount to have an impact. So, first of all, I always run full standard bloods on all my patients. I want to know what their magnesium level is, what their iodine, their selenium. I want to make sure that they're not already at risk of having too much of these nutrients in the
Right.
body.
Okay.
The metabolomic testing that I'm going to show you is another way to determine where we are with certain nutrients. And I'll explain a bit about what metabolic testing is. At our clinic, so we just constantly go to the research. So, what is it in the body that we're trying to achieve? We're trying to support glutathione levels. What does the research say about the nutrients that support glutathione? It says curcumin, vitamin C, selenium, NAC, supplementing with glutathione,
Right.
broccoli powder. Then it's what does the research say about the dose that supports the glutathione? And that is what we use in our clinic. We go with what the research says the dose should be. And we always consider the safety limit too, because most nutrients will have an upper safety limit. And then if the safety limit from the, NIH or European markers or UK, we look at all three, or Australia, we look at as well, is quite low. What we'll look at is, because bear in mind, most of those are designed for people that are quite healthy. They're based on healthy cohorts. We'll look at the research. What is the upper limit that we can take this supplement to without causing harm, that is evidenced in the literature? And if there's something that isn't evidenced in the literature, I'm not going to do it. So when I see something like this, book that came out recently that said people should take IV magnesium at something like 5 grams a day, it's like the only time you should take that is if you're laying in a hospital bed and you're having arrhythmias and there is a doctor administering it. You can do so much harm to yourself if you don't follow safety. So safety first,
Sure.
efficacy second. So efficacy being, what does the research show helps?
Right.
And
And
that's
another quick question is like, okay, when you showed Claire's, this genetic deficiency on the glutathione part, so
yeah.
that means that she should be supplementing for life. Is that it, or is that going to be somehow repaired, or uh, I don't know if my question makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. So we can't really change our genes, but we can support them. So when we look at genetic tests and we look at our weaknesses, quite often it means we may want to consider supplementing for life. But to do that, I recommend that we do things like blood testing and metabolomic testing to gauge where our levels are. Because just because we have a predisposition doesn't mean the body hasn't found a reroute. So these are just predispositions, and we have to acknowledge that as for these tests. They're not saying that we will have no glutathione and our glutathione is going to be diminished. We have to say we are predisposed to low glutathione. And then
Understand.
what we can do is, using metabolomic testing, we can look at what our glutathione levels actually are.
Great. That's
We
what
can
we're going to talk about now, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Great.
exactly. So we can compare these two tests. And let me tell you, I run these tests on people all the time. And what is in the genetic tests shows on the metabolomic tests, as you would expect, because they're both looking at that person's biochemistry. If they didn't, I doubt their validity.
Great. So let's find out about metabolomic testing.
Yeah, so metabolomic testing. So what is it? So if we come back to those little production lines, and we've got a little start and a finish point on the production line, there are metabolites. Our body has all of these metabolites that we're constantly making, you know, methionine to SAMe to homocysteine. They're all metabolites. They're all things that we can measure in the blood or in the urine, which is how we typically measure these using what we call organic acid testing. And how it works is it's a bit of an algorithm, and it's not really measuring in all instances the exact amount of something in our blood. It's measuring our need for a nutrient based on these little metabolites that it sees. So you go to the doctor, you get a B12 test, and you know they'll do B12 and it will give you a rate. In this test, what they're looking at is how many pathways in the body need B12 and which pathways are they. And if the metabolite at the beginning of the production line, if there's too much of it, it's saying that production line is a little bit blocked. So we need to look at the nutrients needed on that production line to help it along, and it determines need that way. So it's a bit hard to get your head around like what metabolomic testing is, and it's relatively new in terms of testing. I noticed a year or so ago that the CDC had sort of approved it as testing. And interestingly, like at University of Sheffield, we now have a really amazing professor who is a professor of metabolomics as part of what he's researching. So this is the way forward. Are these tests completely accurate and completely valid? We don't truly know the answer to that. They're the best we've got. I'm sure over the next so many years, they're going to improve and become even more exact. But I do find them to be quite representative of how someone is presenting. So again, why metabolomics? So as I said earlier, we are detectives. We are looking for anything that's happening in the body. Nutrigenomics, one piece of the puzzle. Metabolomics, another piece of the puzzle, probably a really big piece of the puzzle, but definitely part of the puzzle. So we know that people with neurodegenerative health are impacted by things like mitochondrial function, meaning our mitochondria aren't functioning the way they should. So this dysfunction in the ability to produce energy. We know people with neurodegeneration present with oxidative stress, meaning that there's too much reactive oxidative stress or too many fumes, if you like, in the cells. We know that there's cellular dysregulation. So we know with ALS that there's dysregulation in calcium. We know that there's dysregulation in the entire internal network getting nutrients into the cell. We know there's dysregulation in membranes. We know that there's high inflammation, and we know that there's high toxic load and pathogenic load. So pathogenic load being a biological load, so a virus, candida, mold, bacterial, or high toxic load being your plastics, your petrols, your perfumes, your pesticides, all the P's, and all of the metals as well. So we need to know how effectively pathways function at a biochemical level. And then from there, we can try to determine if they're not functioning correctly. We can use our knowledge of what might impact a pathway or a little production line to figure out how to make it work optimally. And that's our goal. So how does it differ? So nutrigenomic testing is looking at the little supervisor, the little protein that helps the pathway along. Metabolomic testing is looking at the start and end product of each production line. So again, the body is a factory. And if we go back to the Krebs cycle, this would be a metabolite. This would be a metabolite. This would be a metabolite. This would be, you see, because it's the start and the end of a little factory production line. So what we would consider is, well, say citrate levels were really, really, really high. Well, then obviously there's a problem on this little production line. Is the problem with the supervisor? Is the problem a lack of little workers, so a lack of certain vitamins and minerals that we know function on this pathway? Or is it blocked because of a metal or a mold or a toxin? So once we know which little pathways or which little metabolites are either too high or too low, we can start to think about the why. So metabolomic testing tests all of these little metabolites. So it's giving us the current status. So nutrigenomic testing giving us our predisposition, metabolomic testing telling us what's going on in real time. Now, a lot of people come to me and I don't do metabolomic testing for several months. It is quite expensive test. So you can get like from Mosaic, an organic acid test, plus a lot of other toxic tests, tests for toxins like pesticides or metals or plastics and such. Or there's like Nutrival or the metabolomics with add-ons if you don't want to do a full blood draw and instead you want to do like a finger prick. And they're great tests, but they do come in quite expensive. So a Nutrival currently is over £600. A metabolomics with add-ons is £550. So it is a big spend for a test. But it gives you dozens and dozens of readings of your metabolites. And then a test is only as good as the person that reads it. So the number of people that have come to me and they've got their Nutrival and they've been to a functional medicine doctor who has literally just looked at the nutrient recommendation on the Nutrival and actually just prescribed it. Like I can see their supplement list matches that list. And it's like, that's not how we use these tests. You know, that first page is just an algorithm. We have to dig into the detail. We have to understand each of these pathways and know exactly what might block it and exactly what might help it. So that's the sort of difference. So it's really, you know, it's a great test. It's like throwing out a wide net. We're trying to capture lots and lots of different metabolites and get an understanding across the board of what's going on in the body. So it allows us to take a really good look at what's happening, gives us more understanding of the areas that we need to focus on. So this is an example of the Geneva Nutrival test. This is also from Claire. So with metabolic testing, we're looking for high or low levels of metabolites to help us. So again, you can see that this is down regulated and this is down regulated. So something's going on this pathway that means that we're not converting along. And you can see for both of these pathways, there's a need for iron and glutathione. Well, guess what? Claire struggles to make glutathione. So we need to make sure it's not the glutathione. So we need to make sure we're supplementing with everything to support glutathione. But it could also be mercury or fluoride or arsenic or, you know, a number of other metals, or it could be mold impacting the pathway as well. Okay. So if a pathway isn't functioning, is it that we're not getting the nutrients to help it? Is it something to do with our genes? You know, are we genetically a bit slow with our little supervisor? Is it toxic load? Is it stress and emotional trauma? So this is our mitochondria. So is the cell in a cell danger response? We've got to think of that too. Here as well, you can see really high levels of lipid peroxide. So that means there is oxidative stress. So then we've got to think, well, what would cause oxidative stress? So then we need to start thinking about all the potential drivers of that. What do the tests consider? So the Nutrival actually literally just looks at oxidative stress, mitochondrial dysfunction, methylation, inflammation, and toxic load. So it covers pretty much everything on this list. The oat test is great as well. We look at both in my clinic. So there's two of us that work on ALS. There's myself and Kerry. Kerry's excellent at reading these tests. She actually teaches other practitioners to read these tests, especially the organic acid test. I typically use the Nutrival or metabolomics, but I can switch between both. I just feel that gives the most amount of markers. But we're looking at, you know, it's going to give us markers for like oxidative stress, markers for mitochondrial dysfunction, markers for methylation. It's going to look at our potential nutrient need for proteins. It's going to look at all of our proteins. It's going to look at our whole fat profile, our omega-6s, our omega-3s, omega-9s, other essential fats. And it's going to show us where in the pathways there might be an issue. It's going to look at our vitamin and minerals. Looks at things like methylmalonic acid, so a marker for active B12. It looks at folate, and it also looks at metabolites linked to lots of the B vitamins and such as well. The ability to utilize nutrients, so that Krebs cycle, like it's showing the ability for the Krebs cycle to turn. As I said, markers of inflammation, particularly our fatty acids. And then there's also a urine or a blood test available. So with the OAT test and the metabolomics, it's urine, and with the NutrEval, it's blood, looking at mercury, lead, arsenic in the NutrEval, and then a much bigger panel in the urine in the metabolomics and the OAT test. So we can look at exposure to metals, and also specific detoxification markers that are in the test as well, specific metabolites linked to like our ability to produce glutathione.
So Dr. Lawton,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I have a question on that last slide. Will they ever add gadolinium to the testing rather than just like, the mercury and the old school heavy metals, but gadolinium?
It's in there. It's in there. It's on the metabolomics. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, it's on there. And yes, I see it coming up for clients. Do these tests provide all the answers? No, God, they don't, unfortunately. Wouldn't it be great if we could just almost give like a thumbprint and it just told us exactly what was wrong with us? And we're going that way. We're going full body scan. We'll get there in my lifetime, I hope, and it will tell us exactly what we need. But we're not there yet. But what they do is give us clues. We throw out in there, we see that the mitochondria aren't working well. We can then think, right, do we run more in-depth mitochondria tests, or do we run more in-depth pesticide and mold tests, to see exactly what's potentially going on. I use bioresonance testing in my clinic, again, looking at a cellular level to try and understand like what pathogens are there that are potentially driving issues at a cellular level with the mitochondria. From here, deeper testing is always going to benefit. We can work on symptoms as well. A good practitioner should be able to resolve gut health issues without a stool test, or resolve other symptoms without necessarily having to test. But testing is best if the money is there to run the test, because it gives us something exact to work with. So learning more about genetic predisposition and our biochemistry can help us to accurately and appropriately nourish and support ourselves, which is, why these tests can be really valuable. Like, I don't know if I could practice as a nutritionist anymore and not do nutrigenomic testing, because how can I tell someone that how much of a B vitamin they need if I don't know how their body is predisposed to utilizing it? It's such an important part of the picture, and it's becoming more and more a part of personalized nutrition globally. So if you want to work with us, this is our lovely faces. So that's me at the top. Next to me is Deborah, the co-founder. Deborah works mostly with carers, and she specializes in gut health, metabolic health, fertility. Kerry here, lovely Kerry, also works with Parkinson's and ALS and neurodegenerative and neurological health symptoms. She's got a BA in psychology as well as her qualifications in nutritional therapy, but we don't really specialize in mental health so much, but makes her a great practitioner. And then this is Ray, our lovely office manager, who is also a breathwork and movement practitioner. She is a very well qualified yoga teacher, and She's also does Qigong, and she brings and she's qualified in Ayurvedic medicine as well. And she brings all of these different bits of knowledge from all of her different trainings into her breath work and movement sessions. And we do a weekly, so for all my patients, we do a free weekly breath work session that Ray leads. And people can also just have one-to-one sessions with Ray to work on their, lung strength or breathing to calm the nervous system or whatever it is. So that's ours. We're adding as well. So it's a case of watch this space. You can get in touch with us. You can email Ray. Notice I gave you her email, not mine. She'll be so grateful to me on Tuesday morning. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to stop my share so I can actually see you, but if I have to re-share the slides, I can do that as well.
Dr. Lawton, it was a great presentation. Thank you very much. I have one question here regarding the genetic predisposition on any part of person's testing when you determine. My question is this predisposition hereditary, meaning do the sons and daughters of this person have a good chance of having the same type of predisposition, genetic predisposition?
So I'd say that there is that chance because you're inheriting your parents' genes, but of course you're inheriting from two parents. So, you may not completely
win that lottery. You may not win that lottery.
It is. It's like spin the roulette wheel. What am I going to get? But our genetic variations are passed down to us. It can be. There's research looking at the impact of like generational trauma on our genetic SNPs. Over several generations. So looking at people, where people went through wars or huge traumas and what their family genes look like decades and generations later. So it's a huge field. And I am absolutely not a geneticist, but the lady who runs Life Code GX in the UK is a geneticist, and she is a phenomenal brain and so knowledgeable in this area, which is why I use her test, because it means I also get to utilize her knowledge.
I think we should invite her to a meeting if she's available. It would be great.
Yeah, Emma would definitely come and talk. She's, but we'd have to decide what to get her to talk on, because this, I've only briefly touched on nutrigenomics and in methylation and detoxification, but I run things like hormone panels if people are struggling with that. There's, the genetic variations on your ability to utilize lots of different nutrients in the body. So the list is endless. The genes that we now have a lot of knowledge on is endless. And hopefully I'm going to add to that with my little master's dissertation.
Oh, that's great. Looking at your the work you're doing in that clinic, I mean, first of all, makes me want to move back to the UK. But it would be great if you could replicate these clinics everywhere else in the world. I mean, and also, is there a way that these tests could be somehow, because obviously they are quite pricey, and not everybody can afford such tests. We know that. So is there any way that there's something can be done there by, I don't know, is there any, because I feel every person should be doing these tests, and it would be a great way of understanding much better what's going on, right?
So first of all, our clinic works globally. So we have global insurance. So I have clients in Australia, clients in Vancouver and Washington and all over the place. So we do work globally, but people can do something like, so the tests I run are very specific and a bit more expensive, but you could run something like a 23andMe, which is a really cheap test that just reels off all of your genes, and then you can start looking for some of the key genes. So you could look back through this presentation and say, okay, I want to know what my foot 2 looks like because I feel like I need B12. And you could do 23andMe that's like, I don't know, $99, and it gives you your whole genetic map. It doesn't break them down into your pathways, so it's a lot more confusing. And I like these reports because it gives my
more
patients
into
lots.
detail.
But you know, we can do that. I've done that with patients in the past that are like, I literally do not have any money for this. So we'll look at you can get things like 23andMe, and then there's online software that's free to use. I think Ben Lynch, who wrote Dirty Genes, and he's the man that really put MTHFR and nutrigenomic testing on the global map, you know, the consumer map with his book. And I think he's got a program. I think Pure Encapsulations have a program where you can just put your genes through it and it gives you a report. So this is getting more and more accessible to people all the time. Personally, I think everyone should get a free test at birth, and they should have that with them because it's not going to change. And they should be given guidance on how to optimize their health from, you know, to their mother, like the week they appear on the earth.
Right from start. I mean, how many things could be avoided in the future if you have such a map? You know, you have like a good GPS of
Yeah, you
how,
know,
yeah.
if you know from when you've got a child that's a, you know, a baby, that they're going to struggle with their ability to make methylfolate, you know, from when they're at a certain age, you know, you know, at least 6 months when they're weaned onto food, you know, we can start to think about an age appropriate nutrient for them. Or if someone knows that choline pathway is down regulated, you know, or your SAD2 gene, so your ability to like pull down oxidative stress, at least you know that you could really focus your diet on antioxidants, you know, or your child's diet to give the best chance. And you know, as you know, like ALS, Parkinson's, a lot of conditions, we're talking about an onset of 50 to 60 years old. You know, that's 50 years of not having that knowledge and having pathways that are blocked, that are just backing up.
It's like a snowball effect, right? It gets worse and worse because you're not considering all the factors taken into the play.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Good.
William, I think we have some.
Yeah. Sorry, there is somebody who wants to ask a question.
Yeah. Hi, William. This is Dr. Ashish from Ireland. I
Oh,
wonder,
Dr. Ashish.
Hi,
Welcome.
how are you? Thank you very much for, first of all, Dr. Lawton. It was fantastic presentations. I really appreciate that. My wife and I are based in Ireland, and just some 2 or 3 questions. I'll ask them quickly if you have time. If not, no worries. I'll reach out to you separately and maybe look at perhaps an appointment. The first basic question was, my body's kind of behavior, as in response to supplements and some foods even, changed quite significantly after a pretty serious episode of ulcerative colitis 8 years ago. For example, I used to be able to take large quantities of B12, but now I can't. I have to kind of rely on liposomal B12. So something kind of shifted, that's kind of preventing my body from absorbing, and even kind of sulfurous vegetables like sprouts and stuff kind of cause digestive issues. So something has definitely shifted, even though I was able to tolerate those. So the predisposition wasn't there. I was okay, but then after the colitis issue, something has shifted in the body, which I don't really fully understand what may have happened there. So would your testing be able to kind of maybe shed some light on that, do you think? Or
so testing for something like that, we would probably consider, some gut testing. So what we know about ulcerative colitis is that it's potentially autoimmune. So what typically is thought to happen is, prior to that, something would have happened to strip your GI tract, maybe a food intolerance or something, to strip down this lovely gooey mucin layer that's really protective, and I did a lecture on healing ALS on the gut and on the mucin layer a few months ago, but I can repeat that for this group, for Tabitha, obviously. But that mucin layer is gone, and the little dendritic cells that sit in the gut wall start to panic, and they overreact to things that you're eating.
Yeah.
When you're not able to tolerate sulfur foods, it's often because you're missing some of the key sulfur producing bacteria to ferment them. And actually, sulfur foods are very much linked with ulcerative colitis in the literature. So typically when I'm working, and I've worked with lots of patients with ulcerative colitis, we would typically start with some gentle gut support and some stool testing, and some immune support to try and rebalance that dysregulated immune function, where the immune system's in a bit of a hypervigilant state. So we try and calm that down,
Yeah.
and go from there.
Yeah, no, I managed to kind of completely treat the colitis. I've been total remission without any medications and stuff. And that particular last episode was actually triggered by massive Candida overgrowth, which I know was partly due to mercury toxicity. That's also in my. That's why I'm kind of part of William and Tabitha's group, really. So even though I sorted out the colitis, some of the sensitivities still kind of remained, you know. And then, kind of related question. Do you know any experience with ibuprofen, like Nurofen? Because I've recently had a very severe reaction to Nurofen, and it's really kind of caused major digestion problems. I'm just wondering, has it kind of done something similar, as in, damaged the mucin layer again, and causing constipation and everything? Any have you come across anything like that in your studies?
Yeah, so ibuprofen, it can be quite harsh on the stomach lining. And can really cause some gastrointestinal issues. From a genetic perspective, we can actually, running the detoxification pathway for once ibuprofen's in your system. So I showed you the slide on
Yeah, paracetamol.
but I didn't show you the slide, and there is a slide. There is, in that same report, in the detoxification report, we do look at ibuprofen and which pathways that goes down. But it sounds to me that this was probably more of an issue going on in your gut, so probably to do with the ibuprofen and your stomach. It sounds like your gastrointestinal tract is feeling highly sensitive. But just so you know, ibuprofen goes down the glucuronic acid pathway. So if that pathway is down regulated, and you are able to support it with things like stewed red gala apple or calcium glucarate or glucuronidase, if you don't have ALS, because we don't typically supplement with calcium because of the calcium dysregulation if you do have ALS. But if you don't have ALS, some calcium glucarate can help, and so can red gala apples. But it sounds more like we would need to do some work to really support your gut lining.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been taking a lot of butyrate, supporting, producing kind of products really to support it. And so anyway, I think we won't get into all of that. But one final question that I was very intrigued by your, presentation on methylfolate, because very interesting experience, because I do suspect my methylation cycle has been upset by mercury toxicity again. And so I started supplementing with methylfolate maybe about 3 months ago or so. And for the first 2-3 weeks, I had a massive boost in energy. I said, oh my goodness, I've got onto something really wonderful. And then suddenly an energy crash, which was all being caused by methylfolate. So I don't know what the heck happened there, but something. So I've stopped taking it since, really. And since then, I've discovered a lot of people reporting similar things with methylfolate, that after the initial boost, you kind of go into fatigue with it. I'm just trying to understand what is going on in the body that's causing that, really.
Well, again, if you imagine, if you're coming down that first pathway and folate's making the methyl ball and passing it over, making the next ball, passing it over, if you don't have the B12 there functioning to take that ball and pass it to methionine, then you're hitting a wall. So it's all about your different production lines, and I have a patient who has a lot of health issues. I've been seeing her for a very long time, and she can't eat anything with any form of folate in because she's so blocked up in her liver detoxification pathways. So we're trying to almost like pull the plugs out in the liver to let this lifetime of backing up along each production line, because we start at folate, but it literally goes down, round a wheel, spins down, and all the way down through the liver. So if everything at the bottom is backed up, eventually you're not even going to be able to tolerate folate, because you're just trying to push a nutrient down a pathway that's blocked. And again, we have to think about which pathways might be blocked. Methylfolate is impactful in detoxification pathways, in neurotransmitter pathways, in energy pathways, so we've got to think about which pathways the methylfolate is on, and which little production lines follow on from that, if that makes sense.
No, it does. I know certainly with me, mercury toxicity has been a major disruptor. I took alpha lipoic acid and NAC. It was actually for fatty liver, and it cured the fatty liver, but it also mobilized mercury, unfortunately, in me, and it kind of got redistributed and led to severe chronic fatigue. And I still haven't fully recovered from that, really. So that's why we're looking at OSR and stuff. So mercury toxicity has been a big disruptor in my whole. Anyway, I won't take up any more of your valuable time here. I'm going to reach out to you separately to your clinic and try and see how we can work together, both for myself and for my wife. So thank you so much for a superb presentation. It's been extremely helpful. Thank you, William and Tabitha.
No, thank you, Ashish, for your questions and for being with us. And let's go very quickly. There's a couple of questions here. Filson, who is a very dear friend, she has an autistic kid, actually too. And she says, I've done this test for my son while I was working with the UK holistic doctor. I was told I don't need to repeat the DNA test. How would I need to repeat, or just doing blood tests would be right for us going forward?
Yeah, you don't ever need to repeat your DNA test, because your DNA is your DNA. That's your code. It's embedded in your body. What we then do with the DNA testing is we look at how can we upregulate or downregulate a pathway depending on what we're trying to do. Like, how can we use nutrients to manipulate a pathway? So if we've got your son's DNA test and we can see that like his glucuronidation pathway is really downregulated, like what can we do to upregulate that pathway, or support that pathway, or really support the other pathways to take the burden? And that's what we're considering doing.
Okay, thank you for that.
The metabolomic testing would be the next step, to see, as I said, the genetic testing is your predisposition, but to know what's happening in the here and now, it's blood tests, bioresonance tests, or metabolomic tests.
Right. And then the next question, guy, links right to what you have just said. So what kind of test is this? Is the blood test that you do?
Saliva. So it is a DNA test. So picture like a crime and investigation show where they take a saliva test. That's
to find out which supervisor needs to get fired from that factory.
Who done it? So it's just, and Life Code GX ship anywhere. But like I said, there's other tests out there. I think if you ask on Healing ALS, so I know Cynthia Husted, who is part of the extended medical committee, she uses a test in the US that is very thorough. I just go with the test I love, but there's other options out there that may not be as expensive as that. Personally, I don't charge any commission on any of my genetic tests. So you just pay what the company charge. Like I don't need the commission, not because, not saying I don't need the money, but I don't need the commission to need the test. I can look at the test and I know what it means. I don't need the time to read the test, so I just run them at cost. But there's lots out there.
Very nice. Thank you. That's very nice. Okay, I think there were iPhone 2. I think that's Ashish. I've missed the clinic email address. Can you post it here, please? Can you post the email?
Let me just
And
in here.
And
okay,
if
I think
anyone
that,
has other questions,
yeah,
now
there
it's the
is.
time.
Okay. Dr. Lawton just shared the links here, which we're going to share also in our group, no problem. And as we said, this presentation, this fantastic presentation, has been recorded, and many people watch it later on. So I'm sure we'll have lots of questions afterwards. I wanted to ask one last thing, if I may, regarding the breath work that you do, or that this nice lady does. Is what kind of breath work is it? Is it any way linked to like pranayams and uh, uh, like yogic tradition, pranayams, and so is that it?
Yeah, so it brings in all different types of training that Ray has done. So I'm sure she'd hop on and do a breathwork session. We do it every Wednesday in our clinic, as I said, for our patients. So we do, there's some of the movements that we do that are Qigong related,
Right.
some are from an Ayurvedic base, others are from different yoga courses that Ray has done. So she's been teaching yoga for decades, but she's my office manager, but she does that like on 3 days of the week, but she also does a lot of one-to-one breath work with some of my patients, as well as other people that have reached out to her. So like with some of my patients, she might be helping them to like develop a 10-minute morning breath work to calm their nervous
Right.
system, or it might be exercises to strengthen lung capacity,
May have told me what's happened with my gut.
It's got hypervigilant, you're
I think neurofenetic.
Tabitha. So,
Yeah,
yeah, no, it was more like a personal question. I've been working with yogic breathwork practices for many years, many courses that I have done throughout the years, and like I think when it comes to trauma, big trauma issues and so that can be solved through the breath, and everyday stress and that CEO mind, like you were mentioning before, like fight or flight type of mentality, which is really horrible. It doesn't allow you to sleep, doesn't allow you to relax, and to for example, when you sleep, go into your REM phase where you are actually detoxifying, and your organs are kind of like backwashing and doing all the great work that they're supposed to be doing. So yeah, thank you for that. And it just
so
comes to show that all these things together from all these traditions, they work quite well, doesn't it?
I think the best advice for anyone who is, struggling with sleep or fight or flight is early morning light. We're all actually organisms on this earth. We need our feet on grass. We need the early morning light. It stimulates our eyes, which are actually part of our brain. The eyes send a message to every cell in the body, like a circadian message, like all the way down. Every cell has its own circadian clock, and it readjusts it so the cell knows what to do at that time of day. And what also then happens is in the early morning, we have high cortisol and low melatonin. And that early morning light exposure triggers the start of the process of getting to the end of the day where we have high melatonin, low cortisol. So we need to get that early morning light. Anyone who really is that sort of fight or flight, whether it's through trauma, there's probably a genetic reasoning for it too. In fact, I know before I run the tests which of my clients is going to be down regulated in their Compton MAO genes. It's a very clear personality type. You can see it in people's.
the vitamin D. My vitamin D levels were really low in the last test I had. So I was trying to supplement vitamin D, synthetic vitamin D, and I wasn't feeling that great. Actually, what it was making me feel like weird. So I decided to change the strategy. So I think it's now for 3 weeks more or less. I've been taking coconut oil with cocoa, 100% pure, and a little bit of cinnamon every day, taking a sun bath. I go outside in the sun. I spend like half an hour and I'm feeling great.
Yeah,
I
I
know
bet.
the cholesterol, the fat, they are really needed in the vitamin D conversion, and I've been using that and I'm feeling really, really good. We can tell. Food's
Unfortunately,
changing.
have your lovely sun all year round here,
Yes,
Tabitha, or are you doing the same? But actually, we have to remember as well that no vitamin works as a standalone. So without K2, which the gut can produce, without magnesium, taking a lot of vitamin D isn't always the only answer. We have to make sure we're taking it in combination with other nutrients and also not throwing other nutrients off track. If we really, really overdose on vitamin D, we can start to throw calcium off track. We've got to really think about it. People get hung up on one nutrient, and that's not how we eat. We don't go and pick
the
vitamin.
vitamin D I was using, it was a vitamin D with vitamin K,
Okay.
vitamin K, KM27, that
Yeah,
form of vitamin K, they were together, but I wasn't feeling that good. I was feeling better like going out in the sun and increasing my fats in my diet.
it's the best way. It's the most natural way. We all need a lot more fats. So choline, which I'm doing my master's on, is so essential. I always say to all my clients, like take sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, whiz them all up and throw them on everything like confetti at a wedding. Just get more fats in, get coconut,
Exactly.
get MCTs in, get animal fats in, fat, fat, fat. Like every single cell in your body has a double fat membrane, and then every single mitochondria has two fat membranes. We are so deficient in healthy fats thanks to Ansel Keys and the low fat message that was embedded in health messages all over the world that has just been debunked. Yeah, so Janet, if you have an oxalate issue, then actually I don't really go with C15 so much, but some people like it. But if you have an oxalate issue, but typically if your gut lining is great, oxalates can't pass through into your blood, and if your candida level is okay, you may not have an oxalate issue. I've been a clinician for 25 years and I've only ever had one client with a true oxalate issue. One in all my years of practice who actually had huge issues with oxalate. And even then, you can take a little bit of oxalate. You've just got to be careful not to go over the tipping point with it. And what can happen in this world of ALS, or when we listen to different podcasters, is they're like, don't have any of that, don't have any of that, you have to go carnivore, no, you have to be vegan, no, you have to be paleo. There's a lot out there that is very severe, like a big pendulum, like you have to be all the way over here, or you
Like
can't have.
one size fits all, like trying to make it one size fit all, and it doesn't work like that.
You gotta, you can't have any of that food. And it's like, well, why don't we break it down a little and think if there's a way to get a little bit of it in if it's good. But if we don't, if we know that something triggers us, so if we know that high oxalate foods trigger us, we've got to think, okay, we may need to cut them down. But then what we've got to think is why. Functional medicine is why. If you run out of whys, you're at the root cause. My mitochondria aren't working. Why?
Shafiq raised his hand. I think he wants to
Yes.
ask a question.
Shafiq, you want to
Thank
open your
you.
mic? There you go.
Hi, William. Hi, Dr. Lawton.
I should
Can
be.
you, hi. So, really quick question. Again, thank you for a wonderful presentation and really informative information, really. We're actually working with someone, and it's very early days into the plan. And and again, it probably comes from fear of missing out, really. Do you do like second opinion on current plans? If someone's got a current plan, a second opinion on that?
have done it in the past for some of my ALS clients. The thing is, different practitioners are going to do things different ways, and it doesn't necessarily mean their way is right or wrong, because they'll have a strategy in their mind of what they're going to do and what they're working. Where it becomes a problem, so what I see, because I specialize in ALS, and ALS is, people are so sensitive compared to other people. So people will get an ALS diagnosis and they go to the practitioner, and the practitioner's like, we're going to detoxify. And I have people come to me having taken, loads of binders or have done loads of treatments, and they're crashing because the doctor doesn't understand ALS. They understand detoxification or they understand mold, but they don't understand ALS. So it really depends on your diagnosis. But yeah, I mean, it's something I can definitely have a chat with you about, and we can see what it is exactly you're looking for with a second opinion. But typically, to work with someone, I really need, like, I can't look at someone's supplement list other than to say I don't think it's safe, or I can't really, like, I have to have someone's entire history. So my intake questionnaire is so intensive. I take your entire life timeline, and because I have to really understand what's going on for you, and I have to look at all the tests. But reach out and let's just book a quick chat, and you can talk me through your diagnosis and what's come up on your tests, and we can figure something out. Sure.
Sure, thank you. That's absolutely understandable. I'll be in touch with the office. Thank you.
Very welcome. Just in the email, Shafiq, if you can just give a summary of your diagnosis or your symptoms if there's no diagnosis, what tests have been run, where your practitioner is. If it's in the UK, I'll probably know them, but that doesn't mean I'll go to them and say anything. It just means I'll know their expertise, because I taught functional medicine in the UK for years, and we're a small, close-knit group, and I run the UK's network for functional medicine. So, I'll probably know if they're suited to your condition.
I'm sure you do, because Shafiq is based in London, as I have learned.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
I'm sure you will. Yes, I'll drop you an email.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please do.
Right. Well, we've been already like 1.5 hours. Thank you very much for your precious time. I actually have one last question, if I may, and it has to do with the ALS, the type of ALS that is hereditary, right? My sister, who is listening to this, I'm sure she would be interested in knowing, because then there is all this genetic predisposition already, right, playing into the whole thing. What I mean, I have this thing in my mind, like when you are genetically predispositioned to something, it's like very complicated. And you were just explaining that, okay, there are some things that you can do to, right, like you can do to adjust this or to avoid that, right? So is the treatment so much different? And what kind of results are you obtaining with ALS patients with such genetic heritage?
Yeah. So first of all, I know some people, don't want to know if there's a genetic predisposition, but actually every university that studies ALS, including University of Sheffield, they are doing the research on the genetic predisposition. So when we talk about breakthroughs in ALS, they are much more likely to happen in the first instance on specific genetic variations. So first of all, it doesn't matter what is going on with your genes. We can still support your gut. We can still support your immune health. We can still support your skin. We can still, do lots and lots of things to improve your overall health. When I have a client, I actually slightly ignore the diagnosis and think, right, what's the presentation? Like, is there something going on in the gut? Is there something going on with the liver? Like, whatever your diagnosis, those things are going to help to optimize your body physically, right? What we know about certain genes, so like the SOD1 gene for ALS, we know that there is we know what SOD1 does as a gene. So again, it's like it's a part of a superoxide dismutase, which reduces oxidative stress. So what can we do? We can really try and keep someone's oxidative stress down. We know that, C9orf72 like has this overproduction. It's called it goes GGGGCC, GGGGCC. It's like a little hairpin loop in the code. So there's misplaced proteins. So what can we do to help the cell, help with autophagy, help with mitophagy, help with cell lining, help clear debris from a cell? Like if we think about it logically, what can we actually do with Parkinson's? Again, certain genes are related to certain things, maybe to oxidative stress, for example, with some of the Parkinson's genes. So what can we do to keep oxidative stress down? So to me, I'll actually share it with you to share with your group, because I recorded a podcast. It's coming out next week. And I was asked, about the rhetoric around ALS and my beliefs around whether anything can be done, or is it just, and I said, saying nothing can be done on any health condition is the easiest and laziest thing a health professional can say. Because of course there can always be something that can be done, even if it's just helping someone with their bowel movements, or helping someone with their skin, or helping someone with their energy, or
quality of life improvement, right?
Yeah, so there's always something that can be done. And I think people get a diagnosis of a familial ALS, and it's like, but is that what's triggered the ALS, or is that just a genetic predisposition? Like for instance, with Parkinson's, with I won't say which gene because I would need to just take a quick look at a presentation to make sure I was getting it right. But with one of the genes, even if you've got the gene, you're more likely to develop Parkinson's if you've been exposed to pesticides. So, we've still got to look at everything else and rule everything else out. We've still got to make sure that genetic predisposition is the absolute reason for what's going on in the body.
Understand. Okay.
And I'll have people say, yeah, I have got C9orf72, but actually I've had gut health issues since I was born. So what does that tell me? It means you've never really absorbed nutrients properly. Your body's constantly been under stress. Your immune system's been overactive all these years. So it's like, clear the noise, what's left.
Clear the noise, clear the fog, right?
Clear the fog, clear the noise, get rid of everything else, see what's left.
Right. Oh, that sounds so encouraging, right? And hopeful for many people who think, this diagnosis, and we know that doctors have the tendency, hey, with ALS, look, go arrange your stuff. You have a year and a half to go, maybe 2 if you're lucky. And I think, we know from our experience already with healing ALS that that's not the
nutritionist I'm listening to.
And so, Bridget, the test that I use that has gadolinium in it is the Genova Diagnostics Toxic Elements add-on. You can get it as just a standard urine test, but I use it as part of, so I actually use the metabolomics with the Omega and the metal add-on, because the Nutrival only looks at the 4 metals in the blood, where the metabolomic add-on panel looks at about 20 different metals in the urine. With ALS patients, I never do a provoked urine test because it's just too dangerous, because they are so sensitive. So I'll typically do more bioresonance testing, which is much more gentle testing to understand what's going on in the cell, rather than like yanking all the metals out into the blood, where they'll just recirculate and relocate themselves, potentially causing more damage. If you want to hop on a call about it as well, just email, and happy to talk you through any of the testing. Are you a practitioner? Yeah. Yeah. Just honestly, just reach out. Let's hop on a call and have a chat.
Great. Well, I think we don't want to abuse your time. Thank you very much, Dr. Lawton. I mean, an amazing presentation. It gave me the goosebumps all over. I want to thank you really for your time and hopeful to have you again very soon
Anytime.
in our channel. I mean, it's so wonderful. Yes, we're going to have we have recorded this and we are going to be posting it in our groups, so no worries there. And well, there's not much I can add, just to thank you, thank you, thank you. Uh,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Amazing.
One of
Amazing.
Amazing
my pals
presentation.
on the call. Hi. Nice
Thank
to
you.
okay, thanks guys. And yeah, like if you want me to come back, talk about the gut, the liver, whatever it is, the
Absolutely,
stuff.
absolutely, it will be a must. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Everything.
you.
I love it.
Bye bye, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. Bye bye.
Thank
Bye.